Long before tourist crowds and postcard pictures, they rose from the desert vast, silent, and carved by calloused hands. Tonight, we drift through time to ancient Egypt, where the pyramids of Giza weren't just wonders. They were the exhausting, dangerous product of thousands of forgotten lives, from dusty quarries to royal tombs, from whispered prayers to endless desert heat. This is the entire story of how the pyramids came to be, slowly, painfully, and with a hint of mystery that still lingers. If the quiet weight of ancient history helps settle your thoughts for the night, you've come to the perfect place. Subscribe now and tap the bell icon for more soft, slow journeys into the forgotten corners of the past. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? It's always amazing to see how far our quiet little stories are reaching. You are standing on the Giza Plateau in the year 2589 BCE, watching as thousands of workers move like ants across the carefully surveyed landscape. The morning sun casts long shadows across what will become the most precisely constructed building in the ancient world. But today, it exists only as chalk lines and surveyor's marks on leveled bedrock. This is the beginning of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, and you are witnessing the birth of an administrative marvel that would rival any modern construction project. Khufu, the second pharaoh of Egypt's fourth dynasty, had inherited more than just a throne from his father Snefru. He had inherited a kingdom at the absolute peak of its organizational capabilities. A state machine, so refined that it could mobilize resources from the Mediterranean to the first cataract of the Nile. The decision to build his eternal dwelling at Giza was not arbitrary. The limestone plateau offered the perfect geological foundation, rising 65 feet above the Nile Valley, with bedrock solid enough to support what would become 6.5 million tons of precisely cut stone. But before a single block could be quarried, an army of scribes began their work. In workshops scattered across Memphis, the administrative capital just 15 miles south of Giza, teams of officials calculated grain yields, recorded the seasonal flood levels of the Nile, and compiled endless inventories of tools, rope, and copper implements. The pyramid project required the coordination of activities across the entire kingdom, from the granite quarries of Aswan, 800 miles to the south, to the limestone quarries of Tura, just across the Nile from the construction site. The bureaucratic precision of this undertaking becomes clear when you examine the papyrus records that survived in the dry sands of the Red Sea coast. These documents, discovered at Wadi el-Jarf, include the logbooks of Inspector Mirror, whose work gang of 40 specialists transported limestone blocks from the Tura quarries to the pyramid site. Mirror's daily entries read with the mundane precision of a modern shipping manifest. Inspector Mirror casts off with his Philae from Tura, loaded with stone, for Aki Khufu. Spends the night at Shikufu. Day 27, sets sail from Shikufu. Sails towards Akit Khufu, loaded with stone. Spends the night at Akit Khufu. These seemingly tedious entries reveal the sophisticated logistics network that supported pyramid construction. Each of Mir's round trips between Tura and the pyramid site took approximately 3 days. His team, part of a larger work gang, called the escort team of the Urias of Khufu, is its prow, made approximately 3 trips every 10 days, delivering several tons of limestone with each journey. The papyri record not just these transport activities, but also detailed accounting for the bread, flour, grain, and dates distributed to each work team. Royal scribe Dedi oversaw this entire escort team of 160 men, divided into 4 specialized work units called Philaes. Each Philae contained approximately 40 people and operated under its own inspector. This hierarchical organization extended throughout the pyramid project, creating a clear chain of command from the pharaoh down to individual stone haulers. The administrative structure required constant record-keeping, not just for transportation, but for every aspect of the project. Tool distribution, food rationing, work assignments, and progress reports. The preliminary work at Giza began years before the first course of stones was laid. Teams of surveyors used wooden measuring rods, plumb lines, and Merket sighting instruments to achieve the pyramid's remarkable precision. The base of the Great Pyramid covers 13 acres and is level 2 within just 2.1 centimeters. The four sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy of 3/60th of a degree. This precision required not just skilled craftsmen, but also a deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics that had been developing in Rum, Egypt for centuries. Workers began by clearing and leveling the bedrock, removing thousands of tons of loose limestone and desert debris. The pyramid's foundation stones were cut to fit the natural bedrock contours, creating a stable base that has survived 45 centuries of earthquakes, floods, and human interference. Archaeological evidence shows that the builders carved channels and drainage systems into the bedrock to prevent water damage. During the seasonal floods, the limestone blocks for the pyramid's core came primarily from quarries located immediately southwest of the construction site. Workers used copper chisels, wooden wedges, and stone hammers to extract blocks weighing between 2 and 4 tons each. The extraction process was labor-intensive and time-consuming. Quarrymen would first cut vertical channels around each block, then use wooden wedges soaked in water to split the stone along natural fault lines. The expanding wood would gradually crack the limestone, allowing workers to extract relatively uniform blocks. Each extracted block required shaping and finishing before it could be incorporated into the pyramid structure. Master masons used copper tools to achieve the precise angles and smooth surfaces necessary for tight joints between stones. The quality of workmanship varied depending on the block's intended location within the pyramid. Outer casing stones, originally made of fine white limestone from Tura, were polished to mirror smoothness. Interior core blocks received less finishing, but still required precise dimensions to maintain the pyramid's structural integrity. The transportation of these massive blocks from quarry to construction site presented enormous logistical challenges. Archaeological evidence suggests that workers used wooden sledges, possibly equipped with wooden rollers, to move blocks across the relatively short distance from the nearby quarries. Copper tools and wooden implements wore out quickly under the constant stress of pyramid construction, requiring regular replacement and an extensive supply chain stretching across Egypt. But the most complex aspect of the early construction phase was not the quarrying or transportation of stones. It was the creation of an entirely new community dedicated to supporting the pyramid project. Archaeological excavations led by Mark Lenner have revealed the remains of a substantial settlement. Dubbed the Lost City, located just southeast of the pyramid site. This community housed not just the construction workers, but also the bakers, brewers, toolmakers, and administrators who kept the project running. The settlement included large-scale bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves daily, fish, processing facilities, and grain storage silos. Evidence suggests that the community supported a population of several thousand people throughout the pyramid's construction period. The bread production facilities alone were massive undertakings, with rows of bell-shaped baking containers arranged in systematic patterns designed for maximum efficiency. Yet as you observe this early phase of construction with its careful surveying, preliminary stone cutting, and community establishment, one question dominates all others. How would these ancient builders actually raise 6.5 million tons of stone to heights of over 400 feet using only human muscle, copper tools, and wooden implements? The challenge that faced Khufu's architects and engineers as the pyramid began to rise above ground level was fundamentally a problem of physics and human endurance. Each stone block, weighing between 2 and 4 tons, had to be lifted higher. and higher as the pyramid grew. By the time construction reached the pyramid's middle courses, workers were hauling massive stones to heights equivalent to a modern 15-story building. The solution they developed was both ingenious and utterly mundane: an intricate system of ramps that gradually spiraled around the growing structure. Archaeological evidence from various pyramid sites suggests that Egyptian builders employed multiple ramp designs, often using different approaches simultaneously on the same project. The most practical system appears to have been a combination of straight ramps leading up the pyramid's sides and spiral ramps that curved around the structure's perimeter. Recent discoveries at the Medum Pyramid, built by Khufu's father, Snefru, have revealed remnants of construction ramps that provide concrete evidence of these building techniques. The ramps themselves represented massive construction projects within the larger pyramid project. Built from limestone chips, sand, and clay, a typical construction ramp required nearly as much material as a small pyramid. The main supply ramp leading from the Nile harbor to the pyramid site was over a mile long and rose more than 200 feet in elevation. This ramp had to be strong enough to support sledges carrying multi-ton blocks, yet flexible enough to be modified as construction progressed. Teams of specialized workers maintained these ramps throughout the construction period. The ramp surfaces required constant repair and resurfacing to prevent sledges from becoming stuck or damaged. During the annual Nile flood, when transportation by boat was possible, workers used the downtime to rebuild and reinforce ramp sections that had been damaged by months of heavy use. The ramps also required retaining walls, drainage systems, and regular grading to maintain proper slopes for hauling heavy loads. The actual process of moving blocks up these ramps involved teams of 20 to 30 men per stone. Workers attached ropes to wooden sledges carrying the blocks, then pulled in coordinated groups while other team members placed wooden rollers beneath the sledges and applied water or milk to reduce friction. The hauling process was slow and methodical, with teams moving perhaps 50 feet at a time before stopping to rest and reposition equipment. But the ramp system was only part of a much larger transportation network that connected the pyramid site to quarries and supply centers across Egypt. The most sophisticated element of this network was the harbor and canal system that brought materials directly to the construction site. Archaeological work by Mark Lenner has revealed evidence of artificial harbors and connecting waterways that were engineered specifically for the pyramid project. The harbor complex, located in what is now a dry depression southeast of the pyramids, could accommodate dozens of boats simultaneously. During the annual flood season, when the Nile rose 30 feet above its normal level, boats carrying limestone blocks from Tura could sail directly to within a few hundred yards of the pyramid construction site. The harbor included stone quays, boat repair facilities, and storage areas for materials awaiting transport to the pyramid. This water transportation system was crucial to the project's success because it quickly allowed the movement of truly massive stones over long distances. The granite blocks used in the pyramid's internal chambers, some weighing over 60 tons, came from quarries near Aswan, over 800 miles south of Giza. These enormous stones could only be transported during the flood season, when the Nile was deep enough to accommodate the specially constructed barges required for such loads. The coordination required for this transportation network becomes apparent when you examine Inspector Mear's logbook entries in detail. His work gang operated according to a precise schedule that coordinated boat departures with tidal conditions, stone availability at the quarries, and space availability at the destination harbors. The papyrus records show that different work gangs specialized in different types of transport. Some focused on the Tura limestone runs, others handled granite shipments from the south, and still others managed the delivery of specialized materials, like the basalt blocks used for certain internal elements. The boats themselves were marvels of ancient engineering, though their construction followed established Egyptian shipbuilding traditions. the largest vessels capable of carrying stones weighing dozens of tons were essentially floating platforms with minimal superstructure. These ships had to be robust enough to handle enormous loads while remaining maneuverable enough to navigate the Nile's seasonal changes and the artificial harbor. Systems at both ends of their journeys. Loading and unloading these vessels required specialized equipment and techniques. Archaeological evidence suggests that builders used earth ramps leading down to the water's edge, allowing workers to roll heavy stones directly from boats onto land-based sledges. During low water periods, when boats couldn't reach the harbors, workers stockpiled stones at intermediate locations, then moved them during the next flood season. The efficiency of this transportation system is reflected in the construction timeline. Of the Great Pyramid, modern calculations suggest that the pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million individual blocks. If construction took 20 years, as ancient sources suggest, workers had to quarry, transport, and position an average of 315 blocks every day. This rate of construction would have been impossible without sophisticated logistics and transportation systems. Yet, even with efficient transportation, the actual construction process presented enormous challenges. As the pyramid rose higher, the ramps had to be extended and reinforced. The spiral ramps that curved around the pyramid's perimeter had to be carefully engineered to maintain proper slopes while avoiding interference with the finished pyramid surfaces. Archaeological evidence suggests that these ramps were partially built into the pyramid structure itself, creating temporary openings that were later filled and finished. The internal ramp theory, proposed by architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, suggests that builders used a complex system of internal passages and ramps to move stones to the pyramid's upper levels. According to this theory, external ramps were used only for the lower third of the pyramid, while internal ramps handled construction of the upper portions. While this theory remains controversial among Egyptologists, it offers a compelling explanation for how builders could have maintained reasonable ramp angles while reaching the pyramid's full height. The construction of the pyramid's internal chambers presented additional transportation challenges. The King's Chamber, located near the pyramid's center and over 140 feet above ground level, required the installation of massive granite blocks, including the ceiling stones that weigh over 40 tons each. These blocks had to be maneuvered through narrow passages and precisely positioned within the chamber structure. The logistics of this internal construction work rival those of the external pyramid building. Tool management represented another crucial aspect of the transportation and construction system. Copper chisels, wooden mallets, and rope wore out quickly under the constant stress of pyramid construction. The papyrus records show detailed inventories of tools distributed to work gangs, along with schedules for tool replacement and repair. Specialized workshops at the construction site produced and maintained the thousands of implements required for the project. As you watch this vast transportation and construction system in operation, with boats arriving daily from distant quarries, ramps extending ever higher around the growing pyramid, and thousands of workers coordinating their efforts with mechanical precision, you begin to understand the true scope of Khufu's achievement. But how did this massive workforce organize itself on a daily basis? And what was life like for the individual men and women who dedicated years of their lives to building this monument? By the 10th year of Khufu's reign, the Great Pyramid had risen to over half its eventual height. And the true magnitude of the engineering achievement was becoming apparent to everyone involved in the project. The pyramid now dominated the Giza landscape, its precisely angled sides reflecting the morning and evening sun across the Nile Valley. Each day brought new challenges as the structure grew higher and the margins for error became increasingly critical. The most remarkable aspect of the pyramid's construction was not just its size, but its precision. As the structure rose, any error in angle or alignment would have been magnified exponentially, potentially making the pyramid impossible to complete. Yet archaeological measurements show that the Great Pyramid's base is square to within 2.1 centimeters, and its orientation to true north is accurate to within 3/60th of a degree. This precision required constant measurement and adjustment throughout the construction process. Master builders used sophisticated techniques to maintain accuracy as the pyramid grew. Wooden measuring rods, calibrated to royal cubits, ensured that each course of stones maintained proper dimensions. Plumb lines and water-filled trenches helped workers check vertical and horizontal alignment. The pyramid's corners were especially critical, requiring careful measurement to ensure that all four sides would meet at a perfect point at the apex. The internal structure of the pyramid was equally precise and far more complex than its external appearance suggested. Within the solid mass of limestone blocks, builders created a sophisticated network of passages, chambers, and stress-relieving elements. The Grand Gallery, a corbelled passage rising at a 26-degree angle toward the king's chamber, represents one of the most remarkable architectural achievements of the ancient world. This passage is 153 feet long and rises 28 feet high, with perfectly fitted granite blocks creating a smooth, ascending corridor. The construction of these internal elements required extraordinary planning and execution. The king's chamber, built entirely of red granite brought from Aswan, had to be constructed while the pyramid was rising around it. The chamber ceiling consists of 9 massive granite beams, each weighing approximately 45 tons. Above these beams, builders created 5 additional chambers designed to distribute the weight of the pyramid's upper courses away from the burial chamber below. These stress-relieving chambers reveal the sophisticated understanding of structural engineering that Egyptian builders possessed. The uppermost chamber has a pointed roof that deflects the enormous weight of the pyramid's apex away from the chambers below. Without these engineering solutions, the king's chamber would have been crushed by the millions of tons of stone above it. The precision required for the internal construction is exemplified by the pyramid's passages. The descending passage, which leads from the pyramid's entrance to the subterranean chamber, maintains a constant angle of 26 degrees and 31 minutes for its entire 344-foot length. The passage is only 3.5 feet high and 3.3 feet wide, yet it was cut through solid limestone with perfect accuracy. Workers had to maintain this precise angle while working in cramped, poorly lit conditions deep within the growing pyramid. The Great Pyramid's casing stones represented the final and most visible demonstration of the builder's skill. Originally, the entire pyramid was covered with highly polished white limestone from the Tura quarries. These casing stones were cut to precise angles and fitted so tightly that a knife blade could not be inserted between adjacent blocks. The completed pyramid would have appeared as a smooth, gleaming monument rising 481 feet above the desert plateau. The installation of these casing stones required different techniques from those used for the core blocks. Each casing stone had to be cut to exact specifications with angles precise to fractions of degrees. The stones were fitted from the bottom up, with each course requiring careful measurement to maintain the pyramid's overall geometry. The final casing stones at the pyramid's apex, including the pyramidion or capstone, had to be installed using techniques that remain mysterious to modern engineers. The workforce required for this level of precision construction was both large and highly skilled. Archaeological evidence from the workers' cemetery and town site suggests that approximately 4,000 primary workers were directly involved in construction at any given time, supported by 16,000 to 20,000 secondary workers who provided tools, food, and other necessities. The primary workforce included specialized roles: quarrymen, stone haulers, masons, surveyors, and engineers. The most skilled workers were the master masons who cut and fitted the pyramid's blocks. These craftsmen served long apprenticeships and possessed knowledge of geometry and engineering that was passed down through generations. Evidence from the workers' tombs shows that many of these skilled craftsmen held official titles. Recognizing their expertise: overseer of the side of the pyramid, director of the draftsmen, overseer of masonry. The organization of this workforce followed a hierarchical structure that reflected ancient Egyptian society. At the top were the architects and engineers who designed the pyramid and solved technical problems as they arose. Below them were the crew leaders and gang foremen, who managed daily construction activities. The bulk of the workforce consisted of skilled stone workers, supported by general laborers who handled transportation and auxiliary tasks. Quality control was maintained through a system of marks and inscriptions that tracked individual work gangs and their contributions to the project. Many blocks within the pyramid bear painted inscriptions identifying the crew that quarried or positioned them. Some of these inscriptions include gang names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure, suggesting a spirit of competition and pride among the work crews. The daily rhythm of construction was dictated by the practical limitations of human endurance and tool durability. Work began at dawn and continued until the afternoon heat made heavy labor dangerous. Workers took regular breaks to drink beer and eat bread, with longer rest periods during the hottest parts of summer days. The construction season was coordinated with the agricultural calendar, with peak building activity occurring during the flood season when agricultural work was impossible as the pyramid neared completion. The construction challenges became increasingly complex. The upper courses required stones to be hauled to heights of over 400 feet, using ramps that became increasingly steep and difficult to navigate. The final courses of casing stones had to be installed with perfect precision, as any error would be permanently visible on the completed monument. The pyramid's completion required the installation of the pyramidion, the capstone that crowned the structure. This element, probably made of granite or possibly even precious metal, had to be precisely positioned at the pyramid's apex. The installation of this final element marked the culmination of decades of planning, organization, and construction work involving tens of thousands of people. Yet, even as the Great Pyramid neared completion, questions remained about the lives and experiences of the people who built it. What sustained these workers through decades of grueling labor? How did they organize their daily lives around this monumental project? And what happened to the vast community that had grown up around the pyramid construction site? Dawn breaks over the Giza plateau in the 15th year of Khufu's reign, and you find yourself walking through a bustling community that has grown up in the shadow of the rising pyramid. This is not the sterile archaeological site that modern visitors know, but a living, breathing town of 10,000 people whose entire existence revolves around the monumental construction project taking place just beyond the great enclosure wall. The air carries the mingled scents of baking bread, wood smoke, and the sweat of thousands of laborers preparing for another day of back-breaking work. The workers' settlement, which archaeologists now call the Lost City, stretches across 45 acres of carefully organized neighborhoods. The town's layout reflects the same precision and planning that characterizes the pyramid itself, with residential areas, workshops, storage facilities, and administrative buildings arranged according to a master plan that maximizes efficiency, while accommodating the needs of a diverse population. The permanent workforce lives in the town's most substantial residential area, consisting of terraced houses built from mud brick and arranged in orderly rows. These houses, while modest by royal standards, represent comfortable accommodations for skilled workers and their families. A typical worker's house includes a main living area with a raised sleeping platform, storage spaces for personal belongings, and work tools, and often a small courtyard where children can play and families can gather in the evening. Archaeological evidence shows that many houses included built-in bread ovens, allowing families to supplement the official food rations with their own baking. The social hierarchy of the pyramid's workforce is immediately apparent as you walk through different sections of the town. The houses closest to the pyramid site belong to the project's administrators and highly skilled craftsmen. These residences are larger and better constructed, with stone thresholds, painted wall decorations, and more elaborate storage facilities. The tombs discovered in the workers' cemetery confirm this social stratification, with administrative titles like Overseer of the Site of the Pyramid and Director of Workers inscribed on the more elaborate burial monuments. In contrast, the temporary workers live in much simpler accommodations located in a separate area of the settlement. These workers, who arrive for 3 or 4-month rotations as part of Egypt's corvée labor system, are housed in long, barracks-like structures that can accommodate dozens of men in a single building. The temporary quarters lack the amenities of the permanent workers' houses, reflecting both their shorter stays and their lower status within the project hierarchy. The distinction between permanent and temporary workers extends beyond housing to every aspect of daily life. Permanent workers receive salaries and maintain family households within the community. Their children are born and raised in the shadow of the growing pyramid, creating a unique culture that blends traditional Egyptian values with the extraordinary circumstances of their lives. These families have invested their entire existence in the pyramid project, with multiple generations sometimes working on the same construction site. Temporary workers, drawn from villages across Egypt, arrive with different expectations and experiences. Many come from agricultural communities and possess skills in moving heavy objects, working with ropes and levers, and coordinating group labor activities. Others are craftsmen from distant cities who contribute specialized knowledge. 2 particular aspects of the construction process. The integration of these diverse groups into a functional workforce requires careful management and clear hierarchical structures. The work gangs themselves reflect sophisticated, organizational principles borrowed from both military and religious institutions. The primary workforce is divided into crews of approximately 2,000 men, with each crew subdivided into gangs of 1,000, files of 200, and divisions of 20 workers. Each organizational level has its own leadership structure, with experienced workers promoted to supervisory roles based on their skills and reliability. The names of these work gangs, preserved in inscriptions found throughout the pyramid complex, reveal the spirit of competition and loyalty that motivated the workforce. Gang names like Friends of Khufu, Drunkards of Menkaure, and the escort team of the Uraeus of Khufu is its prow suggest both pride in their work and devotion to the pharaoh they serve. These names were painted on blocks throughout the pyramid, creating a permanent record of each gang's contribution to the project. Women play crucial roles in the workers' community, though their contributions are often overlooked in traditional accounts of pyramid construction. Archaeological evidence from the cemetery shows that approximately half of the permanent community consisted of women and children, confirming that the settlement functioned as a genuine town rather than simply a construction camp. Women managed households, cared for children, and contributed to the community's economic life through activities like textile production, food preparation, and small-scale craft manufacturing. The presence of children in the community adds another dimension to daily life in the workers' town. Over 23% of the individuals buried in the workers' cemetery were children and infants, indicating that families lived complete lives within the shadow of the pyramid. These children would have grown up with the sound of construction work as the constant background to their lives, with the growing pyramid serving as both playground and future workplace for many of them. Educational opportunities within the workers' community varied significantly based on social status and family circumstances. The children of administrators and skilled craftsmen might receive basic training in writing and calculation, preparing them for supervisory roles within the project or other administrative positions elsewhere in Egypt. Most children, however, began learning practical skills at an early age, starting with simple tasks like carrying water or sorting tools. and gradually progressing to more complex responsibilities as they matured. The healthcare needs of such a large community presented significant challenges. Archaeological examination of skeletal remains from the workers' cemetery reveals evidence of the physical toll that pyramid construction took on the workforce. Many skeletons show signs of arthritis, back problems, and injuries consistent with heavy lifting and repetitive motions. However, the same evidence also suggests that the community had access to medical care, with many injuries showing signs of proper treatment and healing. The workers' diet reconstructed from archaeological evidence of food remains and cooking facilities was surprisingly nutritious and varied. The standard daily ration for laborers included 10 loaves of bread and a measure of beer. But the community's food supply extended far beyond these basic provisions. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of fish processing facilities, indicating regular consumption of protein from the Nile. More surprisingly, bone remains show that workers had access to choice cuts of beef, suggesting that the pyramid project commanded substantial resources for worker provisioning. The brewery complex within the workers' town represents one of the largest ancient beer production facilities ever discovered. Beer served not just as a beverage, but as a crucial source of calories and nutrients for workers engaged in physically demanding labor. The brewing process also provided a safe alternative to water, which could carry diseases, especially during the flood season when the Nile's waters became muddy and contaminated. Religious life within the workers' community blended traditional Egyptian practices with beliefs specific to their unique circumstances. Small shrines and religious artifacts found throughout the settlement suggest that workers maintained devotion to various gods, with particular emphasis on deities associated with craftsmanship and protection. The pyramid itself became a focus of religious activity, with workers likely viewing their labor as a form of religious service that would benefit them in the afterlife. But beyond these broad patterns of community, organization, and social structure, what was daily life actually like for an individual worker? How did these people organize their time, their relationships, and their hopes while dedicating their lives to building an eternal monument for their God King? The pre-dawn darkness of the workers' settlement is broken by the sound of wooden clappers echoing across the mud brick neighborhoods. You are awakened not by the sun, but by the foreman, making their rounds, rousing the workforce for another day of construction. It is the third month of the flood season in the 16th year of Khufu's reign, and the Nile is at its highest level, meaning that boat crews like Inspector Mirrors are making daily runs from the Tura quarries while construction crews work at maximum intensity to position the delivered stones. Kedi, a skilled mason from the permanent workforce, rises from his sleeping mat in the house he shares with his wife Nabat and their 2 children. As a member of the Friends of Khufu work gang, Kedi holds a position of some responsibility within the project hierarchy. His house, located in the better section of the workers' town, includes a small storage room where he keeps his personal tools, copper chisels of various sizes, wooden mallets, measuring cords, and the precious iron blade that belonged to his father, also a pyramid builder. Nabat has already begun preparing the morning meal, using grain from the family's monthly ration to make fresh bread in their built-in oven. The bread she produces is different from the coarse loaves distributed to temporary workers. Her skilled baking creates finer textured bread that provides better nutrition for her husband's demanding physical labor. She also prepares a portion of dried fish and onions, foods that help prevent the diseases that can spread quickly through densely populated communities. Their children, 2-year-old Senab and 5-year-old Itet, have specific roles in the families. Daily routine. Senab helps his father organize tools and carries messages between work crews, while Itet assists her mother with household tasks and the care of younger children in their neighborhood. Both children are learning skills that will serve them throughout their lives, whether they remain in the pyramid workforce or eventually move to other parts of Egypt. Ketty's day begins with a brief stop at the gang leader's house, where assignments are distributed and work priorities established. Today's task involves finishing the casing stones for the pyramid's 85th course, work that requires extreme precision and coordination between multiple specialized teams. Ketty will work with a crew of 12 other masons, each responsible for specific aspects of the stone setting process. The walk from the workers' town to the pyramid construction site takes about 15 minutes, following well-worn paths that have been reinforced with stone chips and sand to prevent erosion during the flood season. Along the way, Ketty encounters members of other work gangs heading to their assigned tasks, quarry workers bound for the local limestone extraction sites, transport crews preparing for another day of hauling blocks up the construction ramps, and administrative personnel carrying the papyrus records that document every aspect of the project's progress. The pyramid site itself is a marvel of organized chaos. Thousands of workers move with practiced efficiency, each following routines developed through years of experience. The main construction ramp, now extending to over 200 feet in height, buzzes with activity as teams of haulers bring freshly quarried blocks to the working level. The ramp's surface is kept moist by water carriers who prevent the wooden sledges from generating excessive friction that could damage both the equipment and the stone blocks. Ketty's team receives their daily allocation of casing stones from the storage area where Inspector Mears' boat crews have been delivering finished blocks from Tura. Each stone has been pre-cut to approximate dimensions, but final fitting requires careful adjustment by skilled masons. The casing stones must fit together with joints so tight that water cannot penetrate, and the external surface must maintain the pyramid's precise angle of 51 degrees and 52 minutes. The actual work of positioning these stones involves a complex choreography of human effort and simple mechanical aids. Ketty and his team use copper levers to make fine adjustments to stone positions, wooden rollers to move blocks across level surfaces, and carefully placed rope systems to control stones during the final placement process. Communication between team members is crucial, with experienced workers calling out warnings and instructions as heavy blocks are maneuvered into their final positions. The physical demands of this work are enormous. Each casing stone weighs between 2.5 and 15 tons, requiring coordinated effort from multiple workers to move safely. The precision required means that work must proceed carefully, with frequent measurements and adjustments. Ketty uses his measuring cord to check the alignment of each stone with those already in place, while other team members verify the vertical and horizontal positioning using plumb lines and water levels. The rhythm of work is punctuated by regular breaks for food and water. The Pyramid Project provides workers with frequent rest periods, partly for health reasons and partly because exhausted workers make dangerous mistakes that can damage equipment or injure personnel. During these breaks, workers consume portions of their daily bread ration along with beer that provides both hydration and calories needed for sustained physical effort. The social dynamics of the work crew become apparent during these rest periods. Ketty, as one of the more experienced masons, serves as an informal teacher for younger workers learning the trade. He explains the properties of different types of limestone, demonstrates proper tool techniques, and shares knowledge about reading the stone's grain to predict how it will respond to cutting and shaping. This informal apprenticeship system ensures that crucial skills are passed from one generation of workers to the next. Interaction between different work gangs creates opportunities for information exchange and social bonding. Workers share news from their home villages, discuss technical problems they've encountered, and sometimes engage in friendly competition over work quality or productivity. The gang names painted on pyramid blocks serve not just as identification markers, but as sources of pride and group identity that motivate sustained effort over many years. The afternoon brings its peak intensity. Construction work continues, but the pace slows to prevent heat exhaustion and dehydration. Water carriers become more active, ensuring that work crews maintain adequate fluid intake. The pyramid's growing height means that workers on the upper levels are exposed to intense sun reflection from the white limestone surfaces, creating potentially dangerous working conditions. Ketty's team completes the installation of 6 casing stones by mid-afternoon, meeting their daily quota and maintaining the project's overall schedule. The completed work will be inspected by supervisors, who check both the technical quality of the stone placement and the aesthetic appearance of the finished surface. Any stones that don't meet standards will be removed and reset, a time-consuming process that emphasizes the importance of getting the work right the first time. The return journey to the workers' town occurs in stages, with different work gangs finishing their tasks at different times throughout the afternoon. Ketty's mason crew typically works until the late afternoon, when the angle of the sun makes precise measurement difficult and the risk of accidents increases. The walk back to the residential area provides an opportunity for workers to discuss the day's accomplishments and plan for upcoming tasks. Evening in the workers' town brings a different rhythm of activity. Nabat has spent her day managing household tasks, caring for the children, and participating in the informal economy that exists within the community. She has traded some of her family's bread ration for fish caught by workers who supplement their incomes through part-time fishing in the Nile canals. She has also spent time with other women in the neighborhood, sharing news and coordinating childcare responsibilities. The family's evening meal is more substantial than their morning bread and beer. Nabat has prepared a stew using lentils, onions, and pieces of the fish she acquired through trade. The children contribute to the meal by gathering fuel for the cooking fire and helping to prepare vegetables. These family meals serve important social functions, providing time for parents to teach children about work, community, relationships, and expectations for behavior. After the evening meal, the workers' town takes on a more relaxed atmosphere. Children play games in the narrow streets between houses, often mimicking the construction activities they observe daily. Adults gather in small groups to discuss work issues, share stories from their home villages, and sometimes engage in informal competitions involving games of skill or chance. The permanent workforce has developed a rich community culture that helps sustain morale during the long years of pyramid construction. Religious observances occur both individually and communally within the workers' settlement. Ketty maintains a small shrine in his house dedicated to Ptah, the god of craftsmen, where he makes daily offerings and prayers for safety and success in his work. Community religious activities often focus on festivals that coincide with significant milestones in the pyramid's construction, creating opportunities for celebration and social bonding. The evening also brings time for tool maintenance and preparation. For the next day's work, Ketty carefully inspects his copper chisels for damage, sharpening edges that have become dull from contact with limestone. He oils wooden tool handles to prevent cracking and checks his measuring cords for accuracy. This daily maintenance routine is crucial because tool failure during work can cause delays that affect entire work gangs. As darkness falls over the Giza plateau, the workers' town settles into relative quiet. The massive pyramid, now rising over 300 feet above the desert floor, looms as a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky. For families like Ketty's, this monument represents not just their life's work, but their contribution to Egypt's eternal glory and their pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. But the pyramid project involves more than just the daily routine of individual workers and their families. How does the complex supply chain that feeds, clothes, and equips this massive workforce actually function? What happens when boats arrive from distant quarries, when tool shipments are delayed, or when the annual flood disrupts normal transportation patterns? The economic machinery that sustained pyramid construction rivaled the complexity of any ancient state undertaking, requiring the coordination of resources from across Egypt and beyond. You are standing in the administrative compound of the workers. Settlement, watching scribes compile daily reports that will eventually make their way to Memphis and the Pharaoh's court. These documents record not just the progress of construction, but the intricate web of production, transportation, and consumption that made the Great Pyramid possible. The scale of resource consumption for the Pyramid Project was staggering. Archaeological evidence suggests that the workforce consumed approximately 1,800 cattle and 17,000 birds per month, along with massive quantities of bread, beer, vegetables, and fish. This level of consumption required a supply network that extended throughout Egypt and involved thousands of people who never came near the construction site, but whose work was essential to the project's success. The bread production facilities within the workers' town represent one of the most impressive examples of ancient industrial organization. Archaeological excavations have revealed bakeries containing hundreds of bell-shaped bread molds arranged in systematic patterns for maximum efficiency. These facilities could produce thousands of loaves daily, but they required constant supplies of grain from agricultural regions throughout Egypt. The grain supply chain involved farmers, boat crews, storage facility managers, and transport coordinators, all working according to schedules that coordinated harvest times with consumption needs at Giza. The brewing operations were equally sophisticated, requiring not just grain for fermentation, but also specialized equipment, fuel for heating, and containers for storage and transport. The ancient Egyptian brewing process produced a nutritious, low-alcohol beverage that served as a dietary staple rather than simply an intoxicant. The brewery workers within the settlement possessed specialized knowledge of fermentation techniques, timing, and quality control that had been developed over centuries of Egyptian beer production. Meat production for the workforce involved both local and distant suppliers. Cattle were raised in the Nile Delta and transported to Giza during the flood season when water transportation was possible. The bone analysis from the workers' town shows that these animals were primarily young bulls, indicating that the Pyramid Project commanded access to high-quality livestock rather than old or inferior animals. The processing of these cattle required skilled butchers, preservation specialists, and distribution systems that could deliver fresh meat to thousands of workers on a regular basis. The tool supply chain was particularly complex because of the rapid wear rate of copper implements used in stoneworking. Copper chisels, the primary cutting tools for limestone work, became dull quickly and required frequent replacement. The papyrus records show detailed inventories of tools distributed to work gangs, with careful tracking of when implements were issued, returned, and replaced. This system required copper mining operations in the Sinai Peninsula, smelting facilities, tool manufacturing workshops, and transportation networks to deliver finished implements to the construction site. The rope used throughout the construction project represented another major supply challenge. Moving multi-ton stone blocks required enormous quantities of strong, durable rope made from plant fibers. The rope had to be thick enough to handle massive loads, but flexible enough to be manipulated by human workers. Manufacturing this rope required agricultural production of suitable fiber plants, processing facilities to prepare the raw materials, and skilled workers to twist individual fibers into strong, uniform ropes. Wood was perhaps the most challenging material to supply because Egypt's native trees were generally unsuitable for heavy construction work. The wooden sledges, levers, and rollers used in pyramid construction required imported cedar from Lebanon and other strong woods from regions far from Egypt. This international trade required diplomatic relationships, commercial networks, and specialized shipping capabilities that extended Egyptian influence throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. The financing of these supply chains reveals the Pyramid Project's integration with Egypt's broader economic system. Rather than using money, which did not exist in ancient Egypt, The project operated through a complex system of state resource allocation, labor obligations, and redistribution. Farmers throughout Egypt contributed portions of their harvest to state granaries, which then supplied the pyramid workforce. Craft workers provided tools and equipment in exchange for food rations and other necessities, distributed through the state system. The corvée labor system that provided much of the workforce also represented a form of taxation in which citizens contributed labor rather than goods to state projects. Workers who arrived for temporary assignments at Giza were typically fed and housed at state expense during their service. But they also brought specialized skills and local knowledge that contributed to the project's success. This system created economic relationships between the pyramid site and communities throughout Egypt. Record keeping for these economic activities required a sophisticated bureaucratic apparatus. Scribes like Dedi, who oversaw Inspector Mir's transport team, maintained detailed accounts of all materials received, distributed, and consumed. These records served multiple purposes. They ensured accountability for valuable resources, provided data for planning future supply needs, and created documentation that could be audited by higher authorities. The papyrus accounting documents revealed the mundane details that made pyramid construction possible. Papyrus H records distributions of bread, flour, grain, and dates to individual work teams, while Papyrus J tracks commodities going out of the granary. These documents show that ancient Egyptian administrators understood the importance of detailed financial control and inventory management for large-scale projects. Quality control throughout the supply chain was maintained through inspection systems and performance standards. Stone blocks from the Tura quarries had to meet specific dimensional and quality requirements before they could be accepted for pyramid construction. Food supplies were inspected for freshness and quality to prevent disease outbreaks that could disrupt the workforce. Tools were tested for durability and performance before being distributed to work gangs. The seasonal nature of Egyptian agriculture and transportation created additional economic challenges for pyramid construction. During the flood season, when agricultural work was impossible, more workers were available for pyramid construction, but transportation by water was easier and more efficient. During the dry season, agricultural work demanded labor that might otherwise contribute to pyramid construction. But overland transportation became more feasible for certain types of supplies. The economic impact of pyramid construction extended far beyond the immediate workforce and supply chains. Communities throughout Egypt benefited from the demand for their products and services. Pottery makers produced containers for storing and transporting supplies. Textile workers made clothing and rope for the workforce. Boat builders constructed the specialized vessels needed for transporting heavy stone blocks. These economic activities created prosperity that extended throughout Egyptian society. The Pyramid Project also served as a form of economic redistribution that helped integrate Egypt's diverse regions into a unified state. Resources from Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, and the desert margins all contributed to the construction effort, while the benefits of employment and food distribution reached communities throughout the kingdom. This economic integration helped strengthen the political unity that made large-scale projects like pyramid construction possible. But as impressive as the economic organization of pyramid construction was, it represented only part of a larger story. The Great Pyramid was not built in isolation, but as part of a complex of monuments that included other pyramids, temples, and supporting structures. How did this broader complex develop, and what does it reveal about the ambitions and achievements of Egypt's pyramid-building pharaohs? Standing on the Giza Plateau in the 25th year of Khufu's reign, you witness not just a single monument rising from the desert, but an entire sacred landscape taking shape according to a master plan that encompasses multiple pyramids, temples, causeways, and subsidiary structures. The Great Pyramid, now nearing completion at 481 feet in height, dominates the scene, but it is only the centerpiece of a complex religious and architectural program that will eventually span over 2,000 acres and include monuments built by three successive pharaohs over nearly a century. The Giza complex represents the culmination of pyramid building technology and religious architecture that had been developing in Egypt for over 150 years. The location itself was chosen with careful consideration of both practical and symbolic factors. The limestone plateau provided an excellent foundation for massive stone structures, while its position on the west bank of the Nile aligned with Egyptian religious beliefs about the afterlife realm of the dead. The site's elevation above the Nile Valley ensured that the pyramids would be visible from great distances, proclaiming the pharaoh's power to anyone approaching the capital city of Memphis. Khufu's pyramid complex extends far beyond the Great Pyramid itself, encompassing a sophisticated network of religious buildings designed to facilitate the pharaoh's transition to the afterlife and maintain his cult for eternity. The Pyramid Temple, built against the eastern face of the Great Pyramid, served as the focal point for daily offerings and religious ceremonies. This temple, constructed from massive granite blocks brought from Aswan, contained chambers for storing ritual equipment, halls for conducting ceremonies, and storage areas for the food offerings that would sustain the pharaoh's spirit in the afterlife. The causeway connecting the pyramid temple to the Valley Temple represents one of the most impressive architectural achievements within the complex. This covered corridor, over 2,500 feet long and originally decorated with elaborate relief sculptures, provided a sacred pathway for funeral processions and daily religious activities. The causeway's construction required massive earthworks to create a level pathway across the uneven terrain between the high plateau and the Nile Valley. The walls were built from enormous limestone blocks, while the roof was supported by granite columns that created a dimly lit, sacred atmosphere within the corridor. The Valley Temple, located at the eastern end of the causeway near the ancient shoreline of the Nile, served as the entrance point for all religious activities associated with Khufu's pyramid complex. This building, also constructed from granite blocks weighing dozens of tons each, contained purification chambers where priests could prepare for religious ceremonies, storage areas for ritual equipment, and reception halls where offerings could be received and processed. The temple's architecture incorporated sophisticated drainage systems to handle water used in purification rituals and flood protection, measures to prevent damage during the annual Nile inundation. But Khufu's complex also included elements that reveal the human scale of royal burial preparation. 3 smaller pyramids built south of the Great Pyramid were constructed for Khufu's queens and other important women of the royal family. These subsidiary pyramids, while much smaller than the King's Monument, required the same precision engineering and massive labor investment as the larger structure. Each queen's pyramid included its own temple complex causeway system and provisions for eternal maintenance of the royal women's cults. The boat pits discovered around Khufu's pyramid provide insight into the religious beliefs that motivated pyramid construction. 5 boat-shaped pits were carved into the bedrock around the pyramid, with 2 containing disassembled cedar boats that were intended to transport the pharaoh's spirit through the afterlife. These boats, over 140 feet long when assembled, were constructed from Lebanese cedar using sophisticated woodworking techniques that required no nails or metal fasteners. The boat's burial in sealed pits was designed to preserve them for the pharaoh's use in the eternal journey through the underworld. The precision with which these various elements were integrated into a unified complex reveals the sophisticated planning that preceded construction. The entire layout was oriented according to astronomical observations, with specific alignments, 2 cardinal directions, and celestial phenomena that held religious significance. The pyramid's passages were aligned with particular stars that were associated with the pharaoh's afterlife journey, while the complex's overall orientation reflected beliefs about the daily journey of the sun god Ra across the sky. the workforce required for this expanded construction program was correspondingly larger and more diverse than that needed for the pyramid alone. Specialized craftsmen were required for the intricate relief sculptures that decorated the temples. Skilled boat builders worked on the funerary vessels, and experienced architects coordinated the construction of multiple simultaneous projects across the entire complex. The administrative challenge of managing these various construction efforts while maintaining quality and schedule coordination required bureaucratic capabilities that rivaled those of modern large-scale construction projects. The religious significance of the Giza complex extended beyond its function as Khufu's burial place to encompass broader aspects of Egyptian kingship and cosmic order. The pyramid represented the primordial hill from which creation began, while the surrounding temples and causeways recreated the sacred landscape of the afterlife on Earth. The entire complex served as a permanent interface between the human world and the realm of the gods, with daily rituals maintaining the cosmic balance that ensured Egypt's prosperity and stability. The economic impact of constructing this expanded complex was enormous, requiring resources from throughout Egypt and beyond. The granite used in the temples came from quarries near Aswan, over 500 miles south of Giza. The cedar wood for the boats was imported from Lebanon through Mediterranean trade networks. The fine limestone for interior decoration came from quarries at Tura, while local limestone provided material for the massive core structures. Coordinating the delivery and utilization of these diverse materials required supply chain management capabilities that demonstrate the sophisticated organizational abilities of the Egyptian state. As Khufu's complex neared completion, plans were already underway for the next phase of Giza's development. Khufu's son Djedefre briefly considered building his pyramid at Abu Rawash, several miles north of Giza, but his successor Kafia chose to return to the Giza Plateau and construct his monument as part of an expanded sacred landscape. This decision would transform Giza from a single pharaoh's burial complex into a dynastic necropolis that proclaimed the divine authority of Egypt's fourth dynasty rulers. But how did Khufu's pyramid complex relate to his father's monuments? And what new innovations did the second generation of Giza builders contribute to pyramid architecture and construction techniques? 28 years after construction began on his father's Great Pyramid, Pharaoh Khufu initiated his own monumental building project on the Giza Plateau. But his approach to pyramid construction reflected both continuity with established traditions and significant innovations that would influence Egyptian architecture for centuries to come. You are observing the early stages of Khufu's complex, where workers are applying lessons learned from Khufu's project, while introducing new techniques and architectural concepts that demonstrate the evolving sophistication of Egyptian engineering capabilities. Khufu's pyramid, while slightly smaller than his father's at 448 feet in height, incorporates several technical improvements that make it structurally superior in certain respects. The builders utilized a more efficient construction technique that placed larger blocks in the pyramid's core, reducing the total number of individual stones required while maintaining structural integrity. This innovation required more sophisticated quarrying methods to extract larger blocks, but it significantly reduced the labor involved in handling and positioning individual stones during construction. The internal structure of Khufu's pyramid also reflects architectural lessons learned from Khufu's monument. The burial chamber is located at ground level rather than high within the pyramid structure, simplifying construction while reducing the stress on the chamber's walls and ceiling. The entrance passage descends at a carefully calculated angle that provides access to the burial chamber while maintaining the pyramid's structural stability. These design modifications demonstrate how Egyptian architects continuously refined their techniques based on experience with previous projects. But Khufu's most innovative contribution to the Giza complex was not his pyramid, but the Great Sphinx, a massive sculpture that combines the body of a lion with the pharaoh's head. and represents one of the most ambitious single pieces of sculpture ever attempted in the ancient world. The Sphinx, carved from a natural outcropping of limestone left by the quarrying activities for Khufu's pyramid, measures 240 feet long and 66 feet high, making it larger than most buildings constructed in the ancient world. The creation of the Great Sphinx required sculptural techniques on a scale never before attempted. The limestone outcropping from which it was carved consisted of layers with different hardness and quality characteristics, requiring sculptors to adapt their techniques. As they worked through various geological strata, the softer layers were relatively easy to carve, but required careful reinforcement to prevent erosion, while the harder layers demanded more intensive work with copper chisels and stone hammers. The Sphinx's construction presented unique engineering challenges that differed significantly from pyramid building. While pyramid construction involved moving and positioning individual blocks, the Sphinx required the controlled removal of hundreds of thousands of tons of limestone while preserving the essential form of the sculpture. Workers had to excavate around the intended sculpture, creating a large depression that allowed access to all sides of the emerging figure, while providing space for the removal of waste stone. The detail work on the Sphinx required specialized sculptors with different skills from those needed for pyramid construction. The pharaoh's face, measuring over 13 feet from forehead to chin, required precise carving to achieve recognizable human features on a gigantic scale. The lion's body, while less detailed than the head, still required careful attention to anatomical proportions and surface textures that would be visible from great distances. The integration of the Sphinx into Khufu's broader pyramid complex demonstrates sophisticated architectural planning. The sculpture was positioned to guard the approach to Khufu's pyramid complex, facing east toward the rising sun in accordance with its solar religious symbolism. A temple was built directly in front of the Sphinx, creating a unified religious complex that combined the symbolic power of the lion pharaoh figure with formal spaces for conducting religious ceremonies. The Sphinx Temple itself represents another architectural innovation within the Giza complex, constructed from massive granite blocks, some weighing over 200 tons. The temple required transportation and construction techniques that pushed the limits of ancient Egyptians' engineering capabilities. The temple's interior design incorporated sophisticated lighting effects, with carefully positioned openings that allowed sunlight to illuminate specific statuary and architectural elements during important religious ceremonies. The quarrying operations required for Khufu's complex were more extensive than those for Khufu's pyramid, because of the additional stone needed for the Sphinx Temple and the pyramid's larger core blocks. New quarrying areas were opened southeast of the pyramid site, with the quarrying activities carefully coordinated to provide both construction materials and the cleared space needed for the Sphinx sculpture. The waste stone from these quarrying operations was used to construct additional ramps and working platforms throughout the construction site. The workforce for Khufu's project included many workers who had gained experience during the construction of Khufu's pyramid, but it also required new specialists with skills specific to large-scale sculpture and the handling of extremely heavy architectural elements. The transportation and positioning of the Sphinx Temple's 200-ton granite blocks required techniques and equipment that represented significant advances over those used for Khufu's pyramid. Archaeological evidence suggests that these massive blocks were moved using larger sledges, more complex rope systems, and possibly the first use of true cranes in Egyptian construction. The construction timeline for Khufu's complex was compressed, compared to his father's project, possibly reflecting both improved construction techniques and the desire to complete the pharaoh's eternal dwelling within his lifetime. The pyramid itself was completed in approximately 15 years, while the Sphinx and associated temples were finished within a similar time frame. This accelerated construction required larger workforces and more intensive resource utilization than previous pyramid projects. The religious significance of Kafr's complex extended beyond its function as a royal burial site to encompass broader themes of divine kingship and cosmic order. The Sphinx, with its combination of human and lion characteristics, represented the pharaoh's dual nature as both human ruler and divine being. The sculpture's eastward orientation connected it with solar worship and the daily renewal of royal power through association with the sun god's daily journey across the sky. The economic impact of Kafr's construction program was substantial, requiring resources from throughout Egypt and demonstrating the kingdom's continued prosperity and organizational capabilities. The granite for the Sphinx temple required expanded quarrying operations at Aswan and the development of new transportation techniques for moving extremely heavy loads. The project's demands for specialized labor led to the expansion of training programs for sculptors, heavy lift specialists, and precision masons. The successful completion of Kafr's complex established Giza as more than just a single pharaoh's burial ground. It became a dynastic statement that proclaimed the divine authority of Egypt's fourth dynasty rulers. The combination of Khufu's Great Pyramid and Kafr's innovative Sphinx created a sacred landscape that dominated the horizon for miles around the capital city of Memphis, serving as a permanent reminder of royal power and divine favor. But the Giza complex was not yet complete. Kafr's successor Menkaure would add his own pyramid to the plateau, creating the final element in what would become the most famous group of monuments in the ancient world. How did Menkaure's contribution complete the Giza complex, and what challenges did the builders face in constructing a third major pyramid on the increasingly crowded plateau? The construction of Menkaure's pyramid, beginning in the 47th year after work started on the Great Pyramid, represented both the culmination and the transformation of the Giza building program. You are witnessing the final phase of the most ambitious architectural project in human history, as workers apply nearly half a century of accumulated experience to create the last of the great Giza monuments. Yet Menkaure's pyramid also signals a significant shift in royal building priorities, reflecting changes in Egyptian society, economics, and religious practices that would influence pyramid construction for centuries to come. Menkaure's pyramid, at 215 feet in height, is less than half the size of his grandfather Khufu's Great Pyramid. But this reduction in scale should not be interpreted as a decline in ambition or capability. Instead, it reflects a more sophisticated understanding of resource allocation and a refinement of architectural priorities that emphasizes quality over sheer monumentality. The pyramid's smaller size allowed for innovations in construction, materials and techniques that demonstrate the continued advancement of Egyptian engineering capabilities. The most striking innovation in Menkaure's pyramid is the extensive use of red granite from Aswan for the lower 16 courses of the exterior casing. This decision required enormous logistical efforts, as each granite block had to be quarried over 500 miles south of Giza, transported down the Nile during the flood season, and then moved from the river harbor to the construction site. The granite blocks, each weighing several tons and requiring precise cutting and fitting, represents some of the finest stonework achieved in ancient Egypt. The choice to use granite rather than limestone for the pyramid's base demonstrates both technological confidence and aesthetic sophistication. Granite is much harder than limestone, requiring different tools and techniques for cutting and shaping. The copper chisels used for limestone work were inadequate for granite, necessitating the development of new cutting methods using harder stone tools and possibly early iron implements. The precision achieved in fitting these granite blocks rivals that of any ancient construction project, with joints so tight that modern observers initially suspected the use of mortar or other binding agents. The construction techniques employed for Menkaure's pyramid reflect the accumulated experience of two previous major projects on the same site. Workers could utilize existing ramps and transportation infrastructure, while also benefiting from established supply chains and logistical systems. The workforce included many veterans of the earlier pyramid projects, creating an unprecedented concentration of construction expertise that enabled innovations in both technique and efficiency. The pyramid's internal structure incorporates design elements borrowed from both previous Giza pyramids while introducing new features that demonstrate continued architectural experimentation. The burial chamber, lined with granite and roofed with massive granite beams, represents the pinnacle of Egyptian stoneworking capabilities. The chamber's construction required the precise fitting of blocks within the pyramid's interior, working in confined spaces with limited lighting and ventilation. The pyramid complex surrounding Menkaur's monument is proportionally more elaborate than those of his predecessors, suggesting a shift toward greater emphasis on the temple structures and associated religious facilities. The Pyramid Temple, constructed from limestone and granite, includes more complex interior spaces and more sophisticated decorative programs than the temples associated with earlier Giza pyramids. The causeway connecting the Pyramid Temple to the Valley Temple was originally decorated with relief sculptures depicting religious ceremonies and royal activities. 3 subsidiary pyramids were constructed south of Menkaur's pyramid for queens and other royal women, but these structures also demonstrate the evolution of pyramid construction techniques. The subsidiary pyramids utilize different construction methods from the main pyramid, with some left unfinished in ways that provide valuable insight into ancient Egyptian building techniques. Archaeological excavation of these structures has revealed evidence of the step-by-step construction process, including the internal ramp systems used to raise blocks to upper levels. The workforce for Menkaur's project was smaller than those employed for the earlier Giza pyramids, but it included a higher proportion of highly skilled specialists. The granite work required master masons with specific experience in hard stone cutting and fitting. The decorative programs for the temples required sculptors and artists capable of creating relief carvings and statuary of exceptional quality. This concentration of specialized skills created workshops and training programs that influenced Egyptian art and architecture for generations. The logistics of completing the Giza complex with 3 major pyramids and their associated structures required coordination between multiple simultaneous construction projects. Menkaur's pyramid was being built while maintenance and completion work continued on the earlier monuments. The causeway systems of all 3 pyramids had to be coordinated to avoid interference, while shared infrastructure elements like harbors and storage facilities served multiple construction efforts simultaneously. The religious significance of the completed Giza complex extended far beyond the individual monuments to encompass the entire sacred landscape. The 3 pyramids were positioned according to astronomical alignments that reflected complex religious beliefs about the pharaoh's afterlife journeys. The overall layout created sightlines and ceremonial pathways that connected all 3 complexes into a unified religious program designed to function for eternity. The economic impact of completing the Giza complex represented the culmination of nearly 50 years of intensive construction activity. The combined projects had employed hundreds of thousands of workers, consumed millions of tons of stone, and required resources from throughout Egypt and beyond. The administrative systems developed to manage these projects influenced Egyptian governmental structures and established precedents for large-scale state undertakings that continued for centuries. Archaeological evidence from the final phases of construction reveals both the achievements and the limitations of the Giza building program. Menkaur's pyramid was apparently left unfinished at the pharaoh's death, with some of the granite casing blocks never installed and portions of the temple complex completed in mud brick rather than stone. These incomplete elements provide valuable evidence about construction methods and priorities, while also suggesting that even the mighty Egyptian state faced resource constraints when undertaking projects of such enormous scale. The completion of Menkaur's pyramid marked the end of the great age of pyramid building at Giza. but it did not represent the end of the site's religious and cultural importance. The pyramid complexes continued to function as centers of royal cult worship, with priests conducting daily rituals and maintaining the monuments for centuries after their construction. The site attracted pilgrims and visitors from throughout the ancient world, establishing its reputation as one of the wonders of human achievement. Yet, as impressive as the completed Giza complex was, questions remained about its ultimate significance and lasting impact. What happened to the vast workforce that had dedicated their lives to building these monuments? How did the pyramid complexes function as religious centers in the centuries following their completion? And what legacy did the pyramid builders leave for future generations of Egyptians and, eventually, for all of humanity? The completion of Menkare's pyramid in approximately 2472 BCE marked not just the end of an architectural achievement, but the beginning of a profound transformation that would affect thousands of lives and establish patterns of religious, social, and technological development that would influence Egypt for millennia. You are observing the gradual dismantling of the world's largest construction site, watching as a community of 25,000 people slowly disperses while the monuments they created begin their transition from active building sites to eternal sacred spaces. The fate of the pyramid workforce represents one of the most significant, yet largely overlooked, aspects of the Giza story. Archaeological evidence from the workers' cemetery suggests that many of the skilled craftsmen remained at Giza even after major construction activities concluded, transitioning from pyramid builders to temple maintainers and religious functionaries. These permanent residents formed the core of a religious community that would serve the pyramid complexes for centuries. Conducting daily rituals, maintaining the physical structures, and preserving the specialized knowledge required to care for the monuments, the administrative apparatus that had coordinated pyramid construction evolved into a sophisticated temple management system. The scribes who had tracked daily stone deliveries and worker assignments became the record keepers for religious ceremonies and temple revenues. The foremen who had supervised construction gangs became overseers of maintenance crews and religious personnel. This transition demonstrates the adaptability of Egyptian bureaucratic systems and explains how the complex knowledge required for pyramid maintenance was preserved across generations. Many workers returned to their home villages throughout Egypt, carrying with them skills and experiences that would influence local construction projects for generations. Master masons who had learned precision stone cutting at Giza established workshops in provincial centers, spreading advanced techniques throughout the kingdom. Engineers who had developed innovative transportation methods applied their knowledge to other royal projects, including temples, fortifications, and infrastructure improvements that benefited Egyptian society broadly. The economic networks that had supplied the pyramid projects similarly evolved to serve other purposes. The harbor facilities at Giza continued to operate as commercial centers, facilitating trade between Upper and Lower Egypt. The supply chains that had delivered granite from Aswan and cedar from Lebanon were adapted to serve temple construction projects throughout Egypt. The organizational methods developed for managing massive workforces were applied to agricultural projects, military campaigns, and other state undertakings. The technological innovations pioneered at Giza had profound impacts on Egyptian capabilities in multiple fields. The precision measurement techniques developed for pyramid construction improved Egyptian surveying and engineering for centuries. The heavy lifting methods created for moving massive stones were adapted for other monumental projects, including the construction of temples and obelisks. The quality control systems established for pyramid construction influenced craft production throughout Egypt, contributing to the distinctive excellence of Egyptian craftsmanship. But perhaps the most significant transformation occurred in the religious and cultural significance of the Giza site itself. As the pyramids transitioned from construction projects to completed monuments, they became focal points for Egyptian religious beliefs about kingship, death, and the afterlife. The pyramid complexes functioned as active religious centers, with daily offerings maintained by staffs of priests and temple workers, who preserved the pharaoh's cults for centuries after their deaths. The Great Sphinx, initially conceived as part of Khafre's pyramid complex, gradually developed its own independent religious significance. By the New Kingdom period, over 1,000 years after its creation, the Sphinx was worshipped as a manifestation of the sun god and attracted pilgrims from throughout the Mediterranean world. The monument's evolution from royal statue to independent deity demonstrates how ancient Egyptian religious concepts could develop and change over time, while maintaining connections to their original meanings. The pyramid complexes also became centers of learning and cultural preservation. The priests who maintained the temples preserved not just religious traditions, but also the technical knowledge required for monument conservation. These religious communities maintained libraries of papyrus documents that recorded construction techniques, astronomical observations, and engineering solutions that had been developed during the building process. This preserved knowledge influenced later Egyptian architecture and engineering projects for over 2 millennia. The economic impact of the completed pyramids extended far beyond their construction costs to include their ongoing role as economic institutions. The pyramid complexes owned agricultural land throughout Egypt, with the income from these properties supporting the religious personnel and maintenance activities required to preserve the monuments. These endowments represented some of the largest economic institutions in ancient Egypt, controlling resources that rivaled those of major cities or provinces. The social impact of the pyramid projects contributed to the development of Egyptian concepts of national identity and cultural achievement. The successful completion of the Giza complex demonstrated Egyptian organizational capabilities and technical sophistication that distinguished the kingdom from its neighbors. The monuments became symbols of Egyptian civilization that inspired pride and cultural confidence for centuries, contributing to Egypt's sense of its own exceptional character and historical importance. The pyramid builders themselves became legendary figures in Egyptian cultural memory. Later Egyptian texts refer to the ancestors who built the pyramids as exemplars of skill and dedication. The work gangs whose names were inscribed on pyramid blocks were remembered in temple records and religious texts as models of devotion to the pharaoh and the gods. This cultural memory helped establish traditions of craftsmanship and public service that influenced Egyptian society for millennia. Archaeological evidence from the post-construction period reveals the gradual adaptation of the Giza site to its new role as a religious center. The workers' town was gradually replaced by smaller communities of temple personnel and their families. The massive construction ramps were dismantled and their materials recycled for other projects. The quarries were converted to burial grounds for religious personnel and wealthy individuals who desired to be interred near the sacred pyramids. The preservation challenges faced by the pyramid complexes began almost immediately after their completion. The fine limestone casing stones were vulnerable to weathering and human damage, requiring constant maintenance and occasional replacement. The temple structures needed regular repair and cleaning to maintain their religious functions. The causeway systems required drainage maintenance to prevent flood damage during high Nile seasons. Yet, despite these maintenance challenges, the pyramid complexes continued to function as intended for over 2 millennia. Religious ceremonies were conducted daily, with offerings presented to the deceased pharaohs according to traditions established during the Pyramid Age. The monuments served as pilgrimage destinations for Egyptians who traveled from throughout the kingdom to witness the achievements of their ancestors and participate in religious ceremonies that connected them to Egypt's golden age. But even as the pyramid complexes established themselves as permanent features of Egyptian religious life, questions remained about their ultimate meaning and significance. How would these monuments be understood by future generations? What would happen to the knowledge and traditions preserved within their walls? And what legacy would the pyramid builders leave for civilizations that had not yet been born? 500 years after the completion of Menkaur's pyramid. During Egypt's Middle Kingdom period, you would find yourself in a civilization that already regarded the Giza monuments as ancient wonders, whose construction methods had become partially mysterious even to the Egyptians themselves. The pyramids had transitioned from recent achievements to legendary accomplishments, inspiring both reverence and curiosity among people who possessed advanced engineering capabilities of their own, but still marveled at their ancestors' achievements. The Middle Kingdom Egyptians, who built their own pyramids and maintained sophisticated architectural traditions, faced the same fundamental questions about Giza construction methods that puzzle modern observers. How did the ancient builders achieve such precision with primitive tools? What techniques allowed them to move and position blocks weighing dozens of tons? How did they coordinate the efforts of tens of thousands of workers over decades of construction? The answers to these questions were already becoming unclear as the specific technical knowledge of the Pyramid Age was gradually lost to time. Egyptian texts from this period reveal both continuity and change in understanding of the pyramids. Significance. The religious functions of the pyramid complexes continued largely unchanged, with daily offerings and ceremonies maintained according to traditions established during the Old Kingdom. However, the technical aspects of pyramid construction were increasingly viewed through the lens of divine intervention rather than human engineering. Middle Kingdom texts describe the pyramid builders as working under direct divine guidance, with the gods themselves providing the knowledge and strength necessary for such monumental achievements. This shift towards supernatural explanations reflects broader changes in Egyptian culture and religion during the Middle Kingdom period. The absolute divine authority of the pharaoh, which had been unquestioned during the Pyramid Age, had been challenged by civil wars and political instability. The new religious concepts that emerged during this period emphasized the accessibility of divine power to ordinary people. But they also created distance between contemporary Egyptians and the godlike pharaohs of the Pyramid Age. Archaeological evidence from Middle Kingdom activities at Giza reveals both preservation efforts and adaptive reuse of the ancient monuments. The pyramid complexes continued to function as religious centers, but they also became tourist destinations for wealthy Egyptians who visited the site to marvel at their ancestors' achievements. Graffiti left by these ancient tourists, written in hieroglyphic and hieratic script, provides evidence of the continued fascination that the pyramids held for later generations of Egyptians. The preservation challenges facing the pyramids became increasingly severe as centuries passed. The fine limestone casing stones that had originally covered all three pyramids were gradually removed for use in other construction projects, exposing the rougher core masonry beneath. This process, which began during the late Old Kingdom and continued for centuries, fundamentally altered the pyramid's appearance while also providing insight into their internal construction methods. The Great Sphinx faced different preservation challenges, as its limestone construction was more vulnerable to weathering and erosion than the pyramid masonry. By the Middle Kingdom period, the Sphinx was already partially buried in sand, requiring periodic clearing operations to maintain its religious functions. The first recorded restoration of the Sphinx occurred during the reign of Thutmose IV in the New Kingdom, over 1,000 years after its construction, establishing a pattern of royal attention to the monument's preservation that would continue. For millennia, the religious significance of the Giza complex evolved significantly during the New Kingdom period, as the site became associated with broader solar worship and the cult of the god Harmachis. The Great Sphinx was reinterpreted as a manifestation of the sun god, attracting pilgrims from throughout the ancient world who came to witness the daily miracle of sunrise over the monument. This religious evolution demonstrates how ancient Egyptian religious concepts could adapt to changing cultural conditions while maintaining connections to their original meanings. The technical knowledge required for pyramid construction was gradually codified into Egyptian religious and magical texts during the Middle and New Kingdom periods. The pyramid texts, carved into the walls of later pyramid chambers, preserve some of the religious beliefs and ceremonies associated with pyramid construction, though they provide little information about the practical engineering methods used. The Edwin Smith Papyrus and other medical texts preserve knowledge of the mathematical and engineering principles that had been developed during the Pyramid Age, though presented in the context of practical applications rather than monumental construction. The international reputation of the Giza pyramids began to develop during the New Kingdom period, as Egypt's military campaigns and diplomatic contacts brought foreign visitors to the monuments. Mesopotamian, Nubian, and Mediterranean travelers left records of their amazement at the pyramid's size and precision, establishing the monument's reputation as wonders of the ancient world. These foreign accounts often emphasize the mysterious aspects of pyramid construction, contributing to the development of supernatural explanations for the monument's existence. The Greek historian Herodotus visited Giza in the 5th century BCE, for 2,000 years after the pyramid's construction, and recorded Egyptian priests' explanations of the building process. His account, while valuable as historical evidence, reveals how much specific technical knowledge had been lost over the centuries. The priests told Herodotus that the Great Pyramid required 100,000 workers laboring for 20 years. Figures that may reflect general memory of the project's scale rather than precise. Historical records, the mathematical and engineering knowledge embedded in the pyramids. Design became subjects of study and speculation among ancient scholars. The precise measurements and astronomical alignments of the monuments suggested sophisticated understanding of geometry, astronomy, and engineering that impressed ancient mathematicians and architects. Some scholars argued that the pyramids encoded advanced mathematical knowledge that had been deliberately preserved for future generations, though the evidence for such intentional encoding remains controversial. This shift toward supernatural explanations reflects broader changes in Egyptian culture and religion during the Middle Kingdom period. The absolute divine authority of the pharaoh, which had been unquestioned during the Pyramid Age, had been challenged by civil wars and political instability. The new religious concepts that emerged during this period emphasized the accessibility of divine power to ordinary people. But they also created distance between contemporary Egyptians and the godlike pharaohs of the Pyramid Age.